In this video, Chris Gardner takes us through the challenges in studying different diets.
So we have this standard national recommendation for weight loss. This is a big NIH 1998 consensus conference that said you should follow the low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet and restrict your calories and exercise a bunch. And it's been around for a long time. This is the prevalence of who's obese in 1985 by state, by percentage. And then it changes from year to year. Oh, I forgot to fix that one. And the colors get darker.
Oh my goodness, this is the obesity.
And then we add a new category in 1991.
Oh my gosh.
And then we add a new category in 1997.
Oh.
And then we add a new category in 2001.
Oh my goodness.
And in 2005, Louisiana adds a new category. So that's the prevalence, not just of overweight, that's the prevalence of obesity. People have 30 pounds or more to lose. So this is pretty shocking, and if you noticed, it didn't really stop in 1998 when that recommendation came out for the diet. Did you see that? It didn't all of a sudden just stop and reverse because we decided you should follow a low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet. So several people took advantage of that, and they said, oh, well, the reason is the recommendation is wrong. You shouldn't really have that proportion of fat and carbohydrate. In fact, you should have a much lower carbohydrate diet. So Atkins said that. We've got longer studies with people eating popular diet type things like Atkins. So here's the very first one that came out. It was in the New England Journal of Medicine. Statistically, for those of you who aren't statisticians, these little p-values are called probabilities, and you have to have a probability of less than 0.05 to be statistically significant. So it was here and it was here, but it wasn't anymore here. But so many people dropped out, by the end it was hard to get a firm conclusion. If anything, the Atkins group lost more weight than the traditional diet. LEARN stood for lifestyle, exercise, attitudes, relationships, and nutrition. And it was basically the health professionals' approach to nutrition. It was a low-fat, high-carb diet. So picture that as health professionals versus the challenger Atkins. And Atkins did a little bit better, okay? But not a very compelling study, tiny study with a lot of dropouts. Here was the only one I can find on South Beach. And these are the South Beach guys that ran it and published it. It has all of the 54 people you see here, and it only goes for 12 weeks. So I'm not very convinced. They did lose a little more weight on South Beach versus the national diet, but not many people and not very long. Okay? Here's another one. I'm not even going to show you the results. These folks had a study design very similar to mine, so maybe that's why I'm not showing you the results. But partly I'm concerned because they started with 40 in each group, and in two of the groups, half the people quit before they got to the end. So I find it hard to come up with a solid conclusion if that many people quit. Although it brings up a really good point. These weight loss studies are hard to run. You can imagine the people who don't lose weight don't really want to come back at the end and tell you that they didn't lose weight. So it's hard to run a study to give you a good answer to see whether or not these work. So here's one that I liked in particular by Bonnie Bream. It was not a particularly large study. This is the sample size of these groups here. She got better retention than almost anybody, so more people stuck with the study. It was only 6 months, though. These mean it was highly statistically significant at 3 months and 6 months. The one thing I really liked about her study, which you may find shocking, is she's one of the only ones who actually measured their diet when they were in the study. If you go back to these studies, they either did a really poor job or they didn't do it at all. They just gave the advice and didn't assess how well they had been doing. So I found this pretty informative. So here's on the top the low-fat group, on the bottom the low-carb group. Okay, and the baseline data before they got any advice, and they have the typical high-fat diet. It's more than 35% fat. It's less than 50% carb. You can also tell if you look at the calorie level, these are overweight people maintaining their overweight on 16 or no, people always underreport. Right? It's just classic. There's no perfect way to do this. You can feed them, but then it's a whole different kind of study. So if you ask people what they eat, they characteristically underreport. And all you can hope is that they consistently underreport. So you can compare them to another group that's also underreporting, and you can compare them over time. But don't take the number of calories very seriously. Okay, given that, after they got some advice, they did what they were supposed to. The top group lowered their fat below 30%, and the bottom group got their carbs down to 15%. Interestingly, they both cut out about 450 calories, so they were pretty even there. But what I found really interesting was at 6 months, start with the top and see almost the same caloric level, virtually the same distribution of nutrients, but on the bottom, they actually couldn't do it. They really fell back a lot. They got to 15% carb when they were all excited at 3 months, but they really couldn't keep it up. Now, 30% carb is still really low, to be perfectly honest, but it's not as low as 15. So really, really low carb diets are hard to do. So that's just a fact of life. And it's also true for really, really low fat diets, which I'll show you in a little bit. Okay, so this was interesting. At least she had some data there. And this is interesting, too, because the way they're reporting it, since they couldn't keep their carbs so low, their calories popped back up a little bit. Although she still showed that they lost more weight than the others, so it's a little hard to reconcile.